First up on this edition of Newton Newsmakers, the mayor announced the majority of city employee unions have agreed to a new 3-year contract. But the aldermen are saying, not so fast. So what's holding it up, and what are some of the factors aldermen should be looking for when examining the proposed contracts? Board of Aldermen President Scott Lennon, Alderman Ted Hess-Mahan, and Citizens Advisory Group Chair Malcolm Salter will be here to provide some context and insight. Then, in our second segment, it's been 10 years since America was attacked by terrorists. A group of Newton residents has come together to build a Newton 9/11 memorial to honor those from Newton who were killed and those whose personal bravery was on display that historic day. Sande, Ginny, Gardner will be here to tell us about the project and how you can help. Newton Newsmakers starts right now. Newton Newsmakers is made possible through the volunteer production efforts of the employees of mass media and big city publishing, and through the support of Newton residents like you. Hi and welcome to Newton Newsmakers. I'm Charlie Shapiro. For the first time in recent memory, just about all of Newton's employee unions and the city have come to the table and hashed out new contracts to cover the next 3 years. The one big area still up for discussion, the teachers, but other than that, City Hall workers, police, fire, engineering, maintenance, and more all appeared on the steps of City Hall to stand shoulder to shoulder with the mayor of the city of Newton and tout the new deals. But some of the aldermen wanted to take a closer look. Scott Lennon is the president of Newton's Board of Aldermen, the legislative branch of government here in the city. Scott is a ward alderman from Ward 1 in Newton, and when he's not trying to keep track of the other 23 aldermen, he is an internal auditor in the Middlesex County Sheriff's Office. Alderman Ted Hess-Mahan is here as well, at large from Ward 3, first elected in 2003, and in addition to his work on the Board of Aldermen, Ted is an attorney. Also joining us, Malcolm Salter, a Newton resident, professor emeritus at Harvard Business School. He served as chair of the Citizens Advisory Group, which is widely recognized as providing a structure within which the city of Newton could, if it chooses, conduct its business in a fiscally sustainable fashion. Can you kind of just spell out a little bit about what that foundation is, and then we can talk about how these contracts may or may not fit within that.
Okay. The Citizen Advisory Group was trying to respond basically to 4 deficiencies. We all know what they were. There was the structural deficit in the operating budget. There was a capital budget problem where we had a lot of, massive backlog in both deferred capital projects and a backlog in deferred maintenance. There was a management issue in terms of the city not being poorly managed, but being woefully undermanaged, and we had a communication issue, which with the city has become so contentious, everybody was sort of playing their cards so close to the chest that there was that issue to be dealt with as well. Having studied this in detail, looking at the revenues and looking at the cost structure of both the schools and the municipality and looking at the capital structure of the city and the lack of performance management, we came up with 43 recommendations and 9 game changers. The most important of which had to do with containing the growth in total compensation within the city. Newton has a very odd situation like other municipalities. We've all heard of the 80-20 rule. Well, Newton has the 80-80 rule. And the 80-80 rule is that 80% of the revenues come from a property tax, which is capped, and we have 80% of the expenditures of the city, of the expenses of the city, are basically personnel costs, which are indexed. And that leads to a structural deficit, particularly when you've got the cap at 2.5% and you've got the cost going like this. So our policy, one of our game changers, the most important one, was a general policy statement. And this will be my last comment at the front end. That statement was, we recommended that we limit the average long-run growth of employee salaries and benefits to the average long-run growth rate of city revenues while maintaining a level of total compensation sufficient to recruit and retain excellent personnel.
Which is exactly what leads into the next point, which is the mayor has now negotiated all of these various contracts. They've come out, the mayor's office, and basically said that over the next 3 years anyway, 2.5% is what the total growth will be with these contracts. Alderman Ted Hess-Mahan is with us today, chair of land use, and you were the one that stood up at the last Board of Aldermen meeting and essentially said, not so fast, let's think about this a little bit more. What prompted you to do that?
Well, I actually had a discussion with a number of my colleagues who had called and had concerns that were really actually very similar to mine. One of which is that the state has just, after many, many years of it being before the legislature, passed muni health reform. And what this does, it makes it easier for cities either to join the GIC, which is the state health insurance plan, which has had a slower rate of growth than Newton and many other municipalities' health plans have had in terms of costs. Or alternatively, to protect workers' rights, it's given public employees unions the ability to negotiate plan design changes that would result in equal savings. Either one would be fine, but you need to understand the problem. Newton's plan rises about 10% per year.
Just the health insurance?
Just the health insurance. And as part of that 80% that Mal was talking about, if you follow through with the numbers on that, every 7 years, the cost will double. So right now it's 40 million, in 7 years it'll be 80 million. That cost gets shared between the city and between the employees. The GIC has grown at historically a slower rate of around between 6 and 7%, so it's somewhere between every 12 years or so. That's going to double in cost.
And that's the growth rate you're talking about, the same time frame. In other words, you're taking the same number of years, the same years.
Yeah.
And in other words, it's apples to apples.
Correct. Although, I mean, there are some differences, there's nuances with all of this stuff. And again, the basic point that I and some of my colleagues were trying to make was that, geez, we really need to understand this new legislation better. We need to understand the possible savings that we could get under the GAC or some comparable plan under this new legislation, but we need to understand how it works before we, cross the Rubicon.
The structure of this is the contracts are the mayor's to negotiate. Right. It's the board's function to either fund it or hold it up, in a sense. So where are you?
Depending on how long we have. Just clarify a couple things. One, the night of the last board meeting, when you say to vote on this, I was one of the two that voted on this. What we were actually voting on last night, there were 3 agreements that were before the board.
Right.
The first agreement has been passed by the board back in June. That was the custodial and clerical workers. That agreement's already been passed. The 3 agreements that were before the board back on mid-August, August the 8th, 2 of them have been discussed in the Finance Committee, voted unanimously by the committee. The Chief Financial Officer was there to answer any questions of the board on those. The third, and rightfully so, I think some of the board members had some follow-up questions with regard to the police patrolman's contract with some of the Quinn bill figures and some of the numbers that are associated with that.
The Quinn bill is the education benefit for officers.
Yes.
That we can get into that in a second.
Yeah, so the point was that night, those were the only 3 contracts that were before the Board of Aldermen. The other 6 contracts won't be before the Board of Aldermen until at the earliest September the 12th. The same night that we had those 3 contracts that were held over until the next board meeting was when the other 6 were actually even referred to committee. So what we've been trying to do that night forward was actually get all of the information, the memorandums of agreement, all the types of information that board members would need to vote on these to make informed decisions. I think that, I can appreciate Ted wanting to, because we talked that evening about having the conversation about the impact or not of the GIC, how that would play into these agreements. And I think we can still have that conversation, but I just want to be clear that evening I did vote to move those 3 forward, also based on the fact that starting on August the 1st, that a lot of the deductibles, the co-payments, all had already kicked in and had already increased. Right. And I had heard from a number of folks who said, geez, I'm already starting. I had a physical therapy appointment that I already had to pay $250. The negotiated deal was I also was supposed to get a health care stipend on the back end of that, which I have not got.
Well, there's a good question, I guess, that follows up on that, which does get into the weeds a little bit. But if the Board of Aldermen hasn't actually approved the funding for the contracts, why would those contracts have kicked in, the provisions of those contracts kicked in, if in fact the board hasn't said that the board is approving the funding for the contracts?
Well, the boards in this case, or at least these 3, I haven't seen the particular language of the docket item for the other 6, but on these 3 we were technically asked to approve a request for a transfer of monies. The savings that were negotiated for these have already been negotiated with the bargaining units, with the healthcare carriers. And the effective date of the negotiation, or what was agreed upon by the bargaining units and by the city and the healthcare providers, was for August 1st. So the mayor has actually asked us has requested a transfer to, sort of bring forward the balance of what would be left on the agreements. He's requested a total of $400,000 for those three contracts over the life of those contracts. So,
but essentially, if the board does not approve the 400 grand,
right,
then the city would not be able to fulfill the contracts. So it does seem that there is a little bit of a potential for disconnect if the executive branch is actually moving forward with contracts without, in a sense, the advise and consent of the Board of Aldermen in this particular case.
Under Chapter 150E, which is what controls any collective bargaining with public employees unions, if the legislative body, in this case is the Board of Aldermen, does not approve the funding for the contract, then it gets sent back to be renegotiated. Now, what that actually looks like, that is yet to be seen. I mean, I want to be fair. I think we all need the information. It's a little difficult to talk about these contracts in isolation, however, because some of the language in it, and Ruth Ann Fuller, actually, Alderman Fuller, was one of my colleagues who had called and had expressed some concerns to me. She actually abstained in the Finance Committee meetings, although for some somewhat different reasons. There's a provision in here that says, and not unreasonably says, that no changes will be made to this health plan design that the unions have agreed to during the 2011-2014 collective bargaining agreement. That's understandable, but it's followed by a provision which says, further, should any federal or state law be enacted purporting to allow any such changes prior to the negotiations for a successor agreement, the city will not pursue any such changes unless it is legally compelled to do so. That creates a concern because, as you mentioned, schools and school committees still not gotten to a contract agreement with the teachers and the other unions in the schools. The other concern I have is because of the costs of these contracts being back-ended somewhat, so that you'll see some really increased costs because of these contracts that don't occur until after they've expired.
Right.
I don't think we know that yet.
Well,
I think the
actually
public knows that. I don't think the public doesn't know that yet because there are.
Well, they know it now. They're starting to know it now.
Well, I think that there's a lot that goes into that. There's a lot of assumptions. This is the whole thing, and I don't want to really try to defend this because I'm not in the weeds, on this at all. But there are a lot of assumptions here, particularly on the healthcare side. For example, there are a lot of assumptions, which I think that the mayor's office thinks are relatively conservative. But it's all about behavior. We don't quite know how people are going to behave. And then with respect to what you're referring to as the end of contract step increases, there are other things going on. The steps have been redefined, people move down, new people come up, people retire. That's why until you get sort of a pro forma out over a period of time, you don't really see what the effects are.
On the homepage of the city's website, to the executive department's credit, I might add, all of the memorandum of understanding are, in fact, viewable to the public at newtonma.gov.
Correct.
And it's right there on the homepage of the City of Newton's website. The one thing that has been brought up, and I think you just alluded to it, is the 3-year contract goes, and then essentially the structure of everyone's compensation, as not health insurance necessarily, but the structure of just compensation, pay, does significantly change on what is essentially the last day, June 30th,
But there are there's several moving parts at the end of the contract. And that's why, although I can fully understand why the mayor's office wants to move this forward as fast as possible, I think also there's always a unattended benefit, from taking a slower look as well, which is that I think we'll all find when we ask what it looks like afterward that a ton of work has been done on it. I don't think they've done this blindly. Well, now, men and women of wisdom can disagree, But I think there's been a ton of work done on that.
But the important thing is you got to show your work. And, you know, we've been presented with some summary figures, but haven't been supported by the numbers that Mal's
So since this has gone so fast, and since we're just about out of time, I do want to bring up one political question, which I think is fair to ask, because I'm hearing it everywhere on the street, and I think other people are too. There is, I think, a concern. I'm not providing any sense of legitimacy to it, but it is a question that comes up where do these contracts look good for 3 years, which is when the mayor essentially will still be mayor, reasonably certainly, and is the cost pushed out in 4, 5, 6 years when the mayor effectively wouldn't have to deal with it? You know, is that a legitimate question to even bring up?
I think it's a tough question, honestly, because I think what the executive office tried to do was show in one of the analyses, show the 3-year period, also extended out to a fourth year to show what that would look like in the you know, the year after the contracts. But also, I would imagine that there are a number of external factors that are going to play into another round of negotiations towards the end of these existing, well, they may be existing contracts, we don't know yet, but these contracts.
If I can just jump in, it's really important to understand what the mayor's office was able to tell us, and it was in response to some of our direct questions. Right. Some of the information I got, for instance, extending Quinn bill benefits to the fire department, firefighters. We haven't gotten their contract yet on our docket to discuss, but we will. They were forecasting in the short term $67,500 a year to pay for them. What wasn't immediately apparent and wasn't part of the figures that were provided is beyond the 3 years, we're looking at something more like $447,000 a year to pay for those same benefits. Now that was from the mayor's office, from the chief financial officer. That's something that I don't know that was necessarily disclosed to people or that they would be aware of. God, like the devil, is in the details. You really need to read these contracts carefully, and as Mal keeps saying, you know, we need to model this, get the numbers, play them out, see how they really work. There's a range of possibilities of what could happen, but we need to understand it before we approve.
With respect to what happens in years 4, 5, and 6, until we get the detailed forecast, I would only add that the reputational costs of being wrong are so enormous that my bet is that we'll have a very informed discussion.
Malcolm Salter, former chair of the CAG, Alderman Ted Hess-Mahan on the Board of Aldermen, and President Scott Lennon. Thank you all for coming in. We'll be back with our next segment right after this.
The Angels from the Attic are helping Alex's Lemonade Stand Foundation. Let's take a look.
There's lots to do. We made signs, a stand, and now lemonade. We're open for business.
Help others. Get your lemonade. We sold every drop.
To find out more, please get your parents' permission and visit our website.
And thank you.
It's hard to believe it's been 10 full years since the terrorist attacks of 9/11. Thousands were killed that day. 8 were from the city of Newton. Now, a group of Newton residents has stepped forward to build the Newton 9/11 Memorial. And with us, the chair of the committee, Sande Young, and the fundraising chair, Ginny Gardner. Thanks, both of you, for coming into Newton Newsmakers. This is a phenomenal thing that you guys are doing. There are a lot of people that are involved with this, broad-based support from all across the community, as it should be and as you would imagine there would be. First, let me just ask you, Sande, what got you involved with this, and then we'll talk to Ginny and see how the fundraising part's going, because that's a big element.
Okay, well, I read in the Boston Globe that the town of Acton was planning on fundraising and building a memorial, and I just read the whole article and I said, this is fantastic, we have to do this too. And I went and talked to Alderman Swiston, and she encouraged me to talk to other people. And one of the people, Tom Sheff, really put me in touch with Ginny. And we didn't even know each other, and now we're like best friends.
Right. But you're getting a lot of support across the political spectrum,
We really are. I mean, on our committee alone, we have such hard workers, and we all have the same passion. We've got Republicans, Democrats, Independents. It makes no difference. We're all the same. We're all Newton residents, and we all feel very strongly that this has got to be done. Right. And we're working with the people, Aaron Goldman from the mayor's office, and we're working with Bob DeRupis from Parks and Recreation. And, you know, we're going to get this done. It's just a matter of time.
Let's take a look at the design, because there was a design competition. There were a number of different architects and designers and folks that chimed in on this. A lot of great ideas, a lot of different ideas. There was a packed room at City Hall in the Aldermanic chamber, actually.
A very hot night.
It was, and the vote was almost unanimous, I think, or roughly unanimous, overwhelming consensus. And what you're seeing on the screen right now is the design. And this came from an architect who is actually from Newton. Just go ahead and talk a little bit about this for a second.
This is Mark Sangiolo's design, and he's got all the elements of, you know, the horrible day of 9/11. He's got, as you can see, the two monuments in the middle spell out 9/11 in Roman numerals. He has the whole thing shaped like the Pentagon, and he also has, you see, a line through the middle. We're not sure exactly how we're going to do that, but it represents the flight path to, you know, from the Pennsylvania. It really went well, the design competition itself. We had 4 really beautiful designs, and we gave them plenty of time to get up and explain their design and take questions. And we had somebody from the Veterans Council, besides our committee itself. We had somebody from the Veterans Council. We had an architect from the Historic Commission on the jury, and we had somebody from 2 people from Parks and Rec, and Aaron Goldman, and all the committee came out to 30 people. And out of those 30, I think 26 voted for Mark's design.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's terrific, and it's great to have a competition like that. It really gets the whole community involved. I know that you've been reaching out to different folks, excuse me, across the political spectrum. Representative Ruth Balzer, I know, has been very, very supportive, and I think one of the discussions was what's the most appropriate place to put something of this magnitude, of this stature, and I had understood that the Representative Balzer had some thoughts on that that a lot of people seem to think.
She did. As a matter of fact, we received a letter, snail mail today, with Ruth's endorsement. She likes the site, she loves the design, she's on board with the whole project. She asked what more she can do. I mean, she really feels that this monument needs to be put on City Hall property. She's dedicated to that as much as the cause, and as is Kay Kahn, Cynthia Cream, Barney Frank's in support of it. Let's see, just want to make sure I don't forget anyone. Ruth Balzer, Cynthia Cream, Barney Frank, Kay Kahn, they've come out publicly for this project. We'll be getting a citation from Kay Kahn's office endorsing the project, endorsing the site. They all feel, because of the 8 people, that it needs to be placed on City Hall property. One will never know the impact these 8 people would have had on our community. But I think we all feel the same way. As community activists in some form, whether elected officials or just community activists, we feel that we're here, we're in the city, and we need to do what's right for the citizens, the people, and this is, I think, a direct result of everyone endorsing this.
Yeah, no, it's terrific, and I must say, as an alderman, a citizen, and somebody who's involved with the committee to whatever extent I can be and whatever extent you'd like me to be,
well, I'm
fully supportive of it being on City Hall property. I think anything less than that is not doing it as much justice as really should be done for such an important and community-wide
that's actually
effort.
my second list, but equally as important is most of the Board of Aldermen have come out in favor of this, and of course, without you, Charlie, you've been so helpful on many levels.
Well, actually, I want to talk about what you're doing, though, which is the fundraising, because I think one thing that people don't really understand is that the city is not paying for this. This is 100% privately raised fund, and so can you talk about what's happening with that as far as the different events that are coming up?
Well, first of all, I want to say again, it's a 501c3 charity, which means it's totally tax deductible. And some of the people that came right out immediately, Capasso Brothers Realty Trust, Twinbrook Landscaping, Ken the Florist, Armando Rossi, who's an activist in Armadillo, everyone knows Mr. Rossi, Boca Bella, Ron Marini, Village Bank came out huge, Laura Fiamonte, D&H Plumbing. I mean, the list is endless, and I hope I didn't leave anyone out, but we've got the best business people in this town. They really are committed to the city. They really are. You know, Paul Capasso, I picked up the phone day one. He hadn't seen the design. He didn't know the location. And he said, come pick up a check. I mean, we have great people in the city ready to help. It just, we have to go out and tap into them. And of course, they can always reach us at our webpage in www.newton911.org. And you can use PayPal or you can send a check. There's lots more information up there. But we really need everyone to get on board and donate. And we are having fundraisers. Sandy has a couple
We can
here.
tell you about this Saturday, the Whole Foods is having a fundraiser for us, and it's from 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock, the one on Walnut Street and Beacon Street. Everybody can come. It's a barbecue outside. It's going to be lots of fun. There's going to be hot dogs, hamburgers, and 100% of the proceeds go to our committee.
And if somebody is watching this show after the Whole Foods event, there's some other events too. So let's roll through those real quick because we're almost out of time.
So at the War Memorial, Wednesday, September 14th, Jessica Locke, who's written a book and she's worked with the firefighters here in Newton and down in Manhattan, is going to be speaking about her book and doing a book signing, and that's from 7 to 9.
And that's on the website as well, I'm assuming.
That's right.
Okay, so we'll put all of these things on the website. We'll make sure to put the address up there. What else you got?
The California Pizza Kitchen in Wellesley is having a fundraiser for us Tuesday, October 11th. You can come in there any time of day, and we'll get a percentage of the proceeds, but they have to have this flyer with them. So we'll get these out to everybody we can. And I just want to say that the city, the Clergy Association, is having a ceremony on September 11th. That's Sunday at 6 o'clock.
And that's on city grounds.
Right,
the
it's
ceremony
City Hall.
is happening on
It's at City Hall,
right,
yeah.
City Hall.
It's going to be really nice. There's going to be a candle lighting ceremony. There's going to be prayers. There's going to be music. Very meaningful. It's only an hour long, and I hope that the whole city comes for this. It's really going to be meaningful.
Well, I don't know. I think there were discussions about what, exactly how much is trying to be raised. Last time I heard it was, somewhere between 25, 30,000, give or take. There may be some donations of labor. Anybody who's watching, if you or somebody that you know has either a company that you think could contribute or you personally could contribute, go to the website. Call up either Sande or Ginny or anybody that you know that's involved with anything that's happening here in Newton. This is just such an important thing that's happening here, and I just wanted to make sure that we spent some time on this particular show, and I know you've been on others as well, and make sure that we're getting the word out as much as we possibly can. So thank you both for coming in.
Thank you, Charlie.
And we'll put the website up again right here, Newton9-11.org. It's the Newton 9/11 Memorial Committee, and it's really something that we should all get behind, and hopefully everybody will. We'll be right back.
The Angels from the Attic are helping Alex's Lemonade Stand Foundation. Let's take a look.
There's lots to do.
We made signs, a stand, and now lemonade. We're open for business.
Help others. Get your lemonade. We sold every drop.
To find out more, please get your parents' permission and visit our website.
And thank you.
That's it for this edition of Newton Newsmakers. I'm Charlie Shapiro. Don't forget to vote on November 8th. If you'd like more information about me, you can visit voteshapiro.org. Meanwhile, I'll see you next time for another edition of Newton Newsmakers.
Newton Newsmakers is made possible through the volunteer production efforts of the employees of Mass Media and Big City Publishing, and through the support of Newton residents like you.